Welcome back. This is, of course, Goku-san DBZ, and today, quickly mentioning and talking about something I like to call nostalgia. And the reason I have this as for a perfect example of a show I feel that is definitely forgotten in the annals of TV history. Today, talking about, in my opinion, 10 criminally underrated and forgotten TV shows of the 1990s. And this looks at many different genres of TV. This is just stuff I remember from when I was younger. Grew up in the 90s. These are all shows that I personally seen. So we will have a variety of different genres and everything. First, four honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut. And I know enough, in my opinion, forgotten TV shows. I can do a second one of these in the future. Let me know if you'd like to do one of these on 80s and 2000s, because there's definitely some very interesting shows to look at. But with that said, first of the four honorable mentions is from Saban. It was a specific series, of course, to use and be milked off of the formula that was used for things like Power Rangers, and also the surprising success of Beetleborgs. Now, unlike them, as well as even VR Troopers, all got physical releases. This series, surprisingly, has never gotten a physical release, weirdly enough, from Saban. The first of the four honorable mentions is Saban's Mask Rider, which is an interesting show. I will say, personally, in my opinion, is the weakest Saban show by far, but still, I do feel it's somewhat underrated. It's very unique, but it unfortunately has not aged the greatest compared to some of the other shows on here. Next honorable mention is a show that was on, I believe it was NBC. It was a sort of mystery drama series from the 90s. It was about this individual that could basically pretend to be anyone they wanted. And the show's name was called The Pretender. If you don't know anything about it, check it out. Even check out clips here on YouTube. It's actually an interesting concept, an interesting show that I haven't really seen done since, strangely enough. Next honorable mention is a show that is more something I liked a bit more when I was younger. Looking back today, not so much. But still, it was an interesting show at its time. It only lasted one season. I do think it's a bit underrated. It's actually interesting. If you like shows like westerns and things like that, from really the late 1800s, early 1900s, you might find interest in this show. This show, though, predominantly was more popular among more religious people for the most part. This show was called Christie. Interesting show. The last of the honorable mentions was a show done by Disney, actually. It was a Disney Channel original series. It was about this group of kids that whenever they put on this weird old jersey, they would end up going into the body of a particular athlete in a particular sport. The show was called The Jersey. Makes sense? But yeah, it's strangely one of the more forgotten shows that Disney Channel actually made. Coming in at number 10 was a great sci-fi show that definitely was obviously influenced by things such as comic book stuff. This was released at the end of the 90s into the early 2000s. It was done by ADV Films, which was the same company that was involved in shows such as the attempted reboot of Beastmaster, as well as was involved with Farscape, and it was involved with Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda, which is, in my opinion, one of the more forgotten shows of the 2000s. But this show was a forgotten of the 90s. It was interesting. It also aired on WGN back at one time. Coming at number 10 is the show called Mutant X. And it has nothing to actually do with X-Men, though you can definitely tell it played a heavy influence in the show. But it's interesting, and if you consider yourself like a fan of X-Men or comic book stuff, Even though it's not based on any real pre-existing material, check it out. Mutant X is interesting and surprisingly forgotten by most people. Coming at number 9 is a forgotten, more family-friendly take on Werewolf. It was an interesting show done by, I believe it was ABC Family or Fox Family at the time. It was an interesting show about this kid or college kid that could transform into a werewolf with his kind of weird gothic uh, sidekick and a female friend of his, and basically he would get involved in hijinks and stuff. Coming at number 9 was the interesting, forgotten show called Big Wolf on Campus. It actually had a pretty catchy. You can find the complete series here on YouTube on Encore Plus YouTube channel. The full playlist, every episode is on it in actually like 720p resolution, which is not bad given the time period. Coming in at number 8 is a somewhat forgotten, except by those of us fans of the Mortal Kombat series. Coming at number 8 is the forgotten, only like 12 or 13 episode series, which has not gotten like a full DVD release or anything, strangely enough. And coming at number 8 is Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm. Now, in the future, if I do another one of these top 10 lists in the future, I will probably discuss about the live-action Mortal Kombat show in that list. But with that said, yes, coming at number 8 is Mortal Kombat Defenders of the Realm, which was actually the debut for Quan Chi, believe it or not. Actually came from that show. It was big on USA Sunday mornings with some other forgotten shows like the Street Fighter animated series. Not a great show, but whatever. It also aired alongside cartoons like Savage Dragon and Street Sharks, which are some other candidates for a future another one of these forgotten lists. Coming in at number 7 was a show that definitely had the very eeriness and creepiness factor with different stories every episode in this weird town. And it originally aired in 1991. It would go on for only like one season. It would gain quite a cult following through the years and would get re-released on air on Fox many years later in the late 90s. This show predates Goosebumps by a good like 3 to 4 years, the Goosebumps show. So it really started and paved the way for shows like Goosebumps, as well as shows like In the Dark and stuff. Coming at number 7 was an interesting show called Erie, Indiana, and they would attempt a reboot with a newer series on Fox Kids called Erie, Indiana, The Other Dimension. Not as good, in my opinion. It would also gain cult following. But Erie, Indiana was a great show that deserves a lot more love than it got. Coming at number 6, you see right here, I put displayed the box set of. Coming at number 6 is the branch-off series of course, the widely beloved and successful Babylon 5, which sadly not as many people know of today except the hardcore sci-fi fans. But this would be a brief branch-off of only one season, unfortunately, but it had a great concept, a very unique opening, intro. It was just interesting all around, and it's sad that the show only got to do like 12 episodes, because it had real potential to be great like Babylon 5. But for what it was, I think for one season still, it is great. Some episodes are formulaic to the stereotype sci-fi show, but still, I think it definitely had its own unique charm to it, with Captain Gideon and many others in the Tech Romancers, I find very fascinating. Coming at number 6 is Crusade. Coming in at number 5 is perhaps the most forgotten series from Saban. During the Golden Age, they attempted to do a Saban Power Ranger-like, taking place in the Middle Ages. And yeah, there was even a dragon in the show, villains. They would use special like swords and stuff to do their equivalent to morphing. It was a fascinating show, and I think it deserves a lot more love than it got. It is called Mystic Knights. It was a great criminally underrated show on Fox Kids, and like Mask Rider, has not received a physical DVD release of any kind. And I'm like, Mystic Knights was so great and have its timing and a lot of concepts and stuff. I think it's great, and you can tell there were a lot of elements in Mystic Knights that they would steal years later for Power Rangers Mystic Force, in my opinion. Coming in at number 4 is probably one of the most criminally underrated crime dramas of the 90s, hands down. This is a show I still will watch off and on to this day. I love the concept and everything. I believe, like, part of this show was actually recorded and produced in Canada, which makes sense, because this would be a duo of a Chicago police detective and a Canadian Mountie and his Deaf Wolf Diefenbaker. Coming at number 4 is the criminally underrated series called Due South. If you've never seen Due South, do yourself a favor and look it up. Coming in at number 3 is, in my opinion, the greatest Disney Channel original show that was ever made. It took a lot of elements from Goosebumps, from Erie, Indiana, and many others, but it did its own thing, and it was great for that. Even when they would change up the main character in towards the end of season 2 into season 3, and that is the criminally underrated series So Weird. Comes at number 3. Coming in at number 2 is more of a drama. This show originally aired at first in 1990, strangely enough. This show would go on for like 6 seasons. It also was branched off of originally starting as a 8-episode miniseries, which was a branch off of the 80s. In my opinion, the 80s had the best version of Anna Green Gables and Anna of Avonlea sequel. This would be a branch off of that, with even some of the characters from Anna Green Gables, like Marilla Cuthbert would appear in it, and Rachel Lynn, and many others. The miniseries would be called Tales from Avonlea, or of Avonlea. This series would be called Road to Avonlea, and it would air on, originally, back in the days when Disney Channel was actually a more highly respected show, and did a lot more interesting and unique things, because it was treated in the early and mid 90s as basically like HBO and stuff. You had to pay separately for Disney Channel. Back in those days, I remember this was the show that debuted my interest and stuff into, at the time, Disney Channel. I love to this day this series. Road to Avonlea is superb. Comes in at number 2, has a huge nostalgia factor for me personally. Coming in at number 1 was a great show that it lasted 3 seasons, but is not very well known here in America. You can find every episode of this in HD quality on Encore Plus YouTube channel. You can find all 3 seasons here on YouTube. I even have the playlist of this and also Big Wolf on Campus on my YouTube channel on the playlist. I have both of those show playlists, so if you're curious at all, check it out. It was a show I grew up with watching originally Encore years ago. In the late 90s, I would originally see it, which was reruns. This was done by a Canadian group, or Canadian networks and stuff were involved in the production of this show. It was fascinating. I may sometime do a retrospective on this show, eventually. This also would be the on-screen TV debut of, at the time, young, up-and-coming Canadian actor Ryan Reynolds made his debut in this show. In episode 12. The boy would have an accident fall, would get in a coma, and in this coma he would enter this weird alternate reality world where there's only kids. There are no adults at all in this world, and they know nothing of adults, and it gets really interesting. In my opinion, it's a fascinating show that is criminally underrated, and I have a huge nostalgia for. But this Canadian-based show was interesting. It was called The Odyssey. It originally aired, I believe, originally in 1980 or 1991 or 1992, and would go on until like 94. But it was great, and I wish more people would talk about this show. Surprisingly, I've seen almost no YouTubers talk about the Odyssey, which is why I'm going to take it on myself to eventually do a review slash retrospective looking at the Odyssey. So with that said, and someday I will get around to doing a review on Crusade as well, and some of these others I've mentioned. But for now, I am working in the near future. I'll be putting on my secondary channel. I'm making this special top 10 list from my main channel. But when I do a retrospective on the Odyssey, it will be my secondary channel, the Goku Report. So check that out. Stay safe. Hopefully enjoy the retrowave music, and I'll see you soon. And like I said, if you get a chance, check any of these shows I mentioned out. And in the future, sometime I will do another one of these top 10s for many other, I think, criminally underrated and forgotten shows. With that said, I'll see y'all soon enough. Stay safe out there.